Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
As the game played on, their banter continued, full of innuendos, teasing, and heavy flirting. "Your cornerback couldn't cover my grandmother," Daniel remarked as the opposing team completed a long pass down the sideline. "And she's 83 with a walker." Kristin snorted into her beer. "Wow. Your grandmother sounds like she has better mobility than your team's offensive line. They're moving like they're stuck in wet cement." "Speaking from experience with cement, are we?" Daniel countered with a raised eyebrow. "Is that part of your design process? Personally testing all materials?" "Only the hard ones." Kristin shot back without missing a beat, immediately regretting the unintentional double entendre even as Daniel's eyes lit up with delight. "I set that up perfectly, didn't I?" He chuckled, his gaze warm with appreciation. "You're making this too easy, Thompson." "Nothing worth having comes easy, Carter," she replied, deliberately licking wing sauce from her thumb in a move that was shamelessly calculated but effective, judging by the way his eyes tracked the motion. "Is that a challenge?" he asked, voice dropping to that dangerous lower register again. "Because I do love a challenge." "Everything's a challenge with you," she observed, reaching for another wing. "Fantasy football, business, dinner conversation. Do you ever just relax and enjoy something without turning it into a competition?" Daniel considered this, his head tilting slightly. "Honestly, not often. Competition makes everything more interesting." He leaned forward, dropping his voice to a near whisper. "More intense. Don't you think?" The way he said intense made the word itself feel like a caress, and Kristin fought against the shiver that threatened to run down her spine. "Some things," she conceded, maintaining eye contact despite the heat rising to her cheeks, "are plenty intense without adding competition to the mix." But in between the jokes, the cocky smiles, and the playful challenges, there were moments. Small moments. Where they'd catch each other staring. "You were saying?" Kristin prompted after several seconds of unexpected silence, surprised by his sudden loss of verbal momentum. "Sorry," he murmured, his usual cockiness temporarily replaced by something more genuine. "You're just really beautiful." The simple, direct compliment, free from innuendo or strategic flirtation, caught her completely off guard, rendering her momentarily speechless. Or when Kristin was passionately arguing about a questionable referee call, gesturing animatedly at the screen, completely in her element, and then turned to find Daniel watching her with a soft smile. His eyes crinkled at the corners, beer forgotten in his hand. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Do I have sauce on my face?" "No." He shook his head slightly. "I just like watching you talk about things you're passionate about. Your whole face lights up." Where the noise of the bar seemed to fade into the background. During a particularly tense moment in the third quarter, as both teams lined up for a crucial play, the entire bar seemed to collectively hold its breath. But instead of watching the screen like everyone else, Kristin and Daniel found themselves looking at each other across the table, the game momentarily forgotten. The shouting fans, the clinking glasses, the announcer's voice booming from dozens of speakers. All of it receded into a distant hum as something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, of how surprisingly comfortable this felt. How natural. How right, despite all the reasons it shouldn't be. "This is nice," Daniel said quietly, the admission simple but laden with meaning. "Yeah," Kristin agreed, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "It is." The bar erupted in cheers around them as someone scored, but neither of them looked away for several long seconds, caught in a bubble of connection that felt both fragile and profound. where Kristin would glance up and find Daniel already watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. It happened during a commercial break as she reached for her beer. She felt his gaze before she saw it, that peculiar sixth sense of being observed, and looked up to find him studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His expression wasn't the playful flirtation or cocky confidence he'd displayed most of the evening. It was something deeper, more contemplative, almost searching, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle or memorize a painting. "What are you thinking?" she finally asked. The question more vulnerable than she'd intended. Daniel seemed to consider whether to answer honestly, a brief internal debate visible in his eyes before he replied, "That you're not what I expected." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Definitely good," he assured her. "Just surprising. In the best possible way." And for the first time all night, she wouldn't have a quick comeback. No witty retort or flirtatious counter. No clever deflection or playful challenge. The honesty in his voice had disarmed her more effectively than any innuendo or charm. She just looked back, feeling something way too intense swirl in her chest. A sensation both foreign and familiar, the flutter of genuine connection, of seeing and being seen beyond the surface banter and attraction. It was terrifying in its intensity, this feeling. For someone who had been Kyle just days ago, the depth of emotion Kristin was capable of experiencing was both disorienting and exhilarating. Everything felt more vibrant, more immediate, more consequential. And then one of them would break it, usually with another joke, but the tension remained, simmering just beneath the surface. "You know," Daniel said after one such moment, his voice deliberately lighter, "if you keep looking at me like that, Thompson, I might start to think you actually like me." "Don't get ahead of yourself, Carter," she replied, grateful for the return to safer territory. "I'm just evaluating whether you'd be worth the cost of dinner when you lose our bet." Such confidence. He grinned, the familiar competitive spark returning to his eyes. "I hope you're equally graceful in defeat." "Wouldn't know," she countered, with a matching grin. "Never experienced it." But even as they slipped back into their comfortable rhythm of banter and challenges, something had shifted. The flirtation remained, the attraction undeniable. But beneath it ran a current of something deeper, a recognition of compatibility that went beyond physical chemistry or clever wordplay. "Another round?" Daniel asked as the fourth quarter began, nodding toward their empty glasses. "Trying to impair my judgment," Kristin teased. "Strategic, but unnecessary. My team's dominance is self-evident." "Maybe I just want to extend our evening," Daniel replied with surprising candidness. "The game will end eventually." "I'm not ready for this too." The admission hung between them, another moment of unexpected honesty that cut through their practiced repartee. "Well," Kristin said after a beat, a small smile playing at her lips, "I suppose one more couldn't hurt." "For the sake of thorough sports analysis, of course." "Of course," Daniel agreed solemnly, though his eyes danced with something that had nothing to do with football. Purely professional interest. As he signaled the server, Kristin found herself wondering just how many more of these moments she could handle before whatever was simmering between them boiled over completely, and whether she'd have the strength to resist when it did. The game ended with a dramatic field goal in the final seconds, sending half the bar into jubilant celebration and the other half into groans of defeat. The energy in the iron kick shifted as fans began to disperse, some heading home to nurse their disappointment, others moving to the main bar area to continue their victory celebrations. But neither of them made a move to leave. Their high-top table, once surrounded by rowdy fans, gradually became an island of calm in the emptying section. The server cleared away their empty wing baskets and nacho platters, raising an eyebrow when they both ordered another round instead of the check. "Planning to close us down?" she asked with a knowing smile, glancing between them. Just thorough post-game analysis, Daniel replied smoothly, his eyes never leaving Kristin's face. Very important to process the tactical implications properly. Ah, the server nodded skeptically. I'll get those drinks right out. Take your time with the analysis. As she walked away, Kristin laughed softly. I think we're not fooling anyone. Was I trying to? Daniel asked, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating half-smile that did unfair things to his already handsome face. I'm perfectly comfortable, admitting I'm not ready for this evening to end. His directness was disarming. No games, no pretense, just honest interest laid bare. Kyle would have hedged, would have maintained plausible deniability, would have kept things ambiguous to protect his ego from potential rejection. Daniel Carter, it seemed, had no such insecurities. Instead, they stayed at the table, drinks in hand, just talking. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from topic to topic with an ease that surprised Kristin. The charged flirtation of earlier had settled into something equally engaging, but less performative, a genuine exchange rather than a competitive verbal sparring match. About work, life, past relationships, ridiculous stories from college. Wait, Kristin said, trying to stifle her laughter. You actually showed up to your economics final wearing nothing but a toga. Daniel nodded, his eyes crinkling with amusement at the memory. Lost a bet with my roommate. The professor was not amused, though I maintain my essay on Greek fiscal policy was thematically enhanced by my attire. I'm starting to think your competitive streak might be a character flaw, Kristin observed, taking a sip of her drink. Ah, has it ever gotten you into trouble you couldn't charm your way out of? Once or twice, he admitted, with a rueful smile. There was an incident involving the dean's prized rose bushes that nearly got me expelled. But mostly, it served me well. I never would have started quantum if I hadn't been determined to prove my first investor wrong when he called my initial concept derivative. Spite, the true mother of innovation. Kristin quipped. More effective than necessity, in my experience, Daniel agreed. What about you? What drives Kristin Thompson to excellence? I doubt it's spite. You seem too centered for that. Kristin paused, momentarily thrown by the question. What had driven Kyle had been simple survival, paying bills, getting by, occasionally trying to move up the corporate ladder. But Kristin seemed motivated by something more profound. A genuine passion for her work, a drive to create beauty and functionality in equal measure. I think, she said slowly, finding the truth as she spoke it, it's the transformation. Taking something ordinary and revealing its potential. Seeing what could be instead of just what is. Daniel's expression softened, his usual confident mask slipping to reveal something more genuine. That's actually beautiful. And explains a lot about why you're so good at what you do. The compliment, delivered without flirtation or agenda, landed differently than his earlier charm offensives. It felt real, and somehow more affecting because of it. What about past relationships, he asked, switching topics with practiced ease. Anyone I should be jealous of? Kristin laughed, grateful for the lighter turn in conversation. Jealous. That implies a level of interest beyond professional. Mr. Carter Tartar. I think we established my interest goes well beyond professional, about 3 innuendos and 2 lingering glances ago. He replied with that devastating directness. But nice attempt at deflection. I'll spill it, Thompson. Tragic love affairs, broken engagements. Secret husband stashed away in the suburbs. Nothing quite so dramatic, she replied, carefully navigating the tricky waters of a past that didn't technically exist. A few serious relationships that ultimately didn't work out. The usual story, right person, wrong time. Or wrong person, right packaging. Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. The classic looks good on paper syndrome. I'm familiar with the concept. And you? Kristin asked, genuinely curious. I find it hard to believe someone hasn't locked down Daniel Carter, tech wunderkind and fantasy football champion. Almost happened once, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. Angela. Fellow tech entrepreneur, power, brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. The whole package. We were together for 3 years, nearly got engaged. What happened? Kristin asked, noting the hint of genuine regret that flashed across his features. Daniel shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't mask the sincerity in his voice. We wanted different things, ultimately. She was building a company that required her to be in San Francisco. I was committed to staying here. Neither of us was willing to compromise on our visions. That sounds mature, actually, Kristin observed. No dramatic betrayals or screaming matches. Oh, there were definitely screaming matches, Daniel laughed. We're both too stubborn for our own good. But in the end, it was a rational decision made by two people who respected each other too much to ask for sacrifices neither wanted to make. How refreshingly adult, Kristin remarked, impressed despite herself. Most breakup stories involve someone throwing clothes out a window or dramatic social media announcements. Don't get me wrong, Daniel clarified with a grin. There was definitely a phase where I considered reprogramming her company's website to play baby, come back on infinite loop. But I channeled my energy into more productive pursuits. Like building a tech empire, Kristin suggested. Like perfecting my buffalo wing recipe, he corrected with mock seriousness. It was easy. Too easy. The hours slipped by, almost without notice. 2 drinks became 3, became 4, their table gradually accumulating empty glasses as the bar continued to empty around them. The ease of their conversation was both surprising and unsettling. This shouldn't feel so natural, so comfortable, so right. Kristin caught herself laughing freely at his stories, sharing her own experiences, carefully edited to fit Kristin's life rather than Kyle's, and genuinely enjoying his company beyond the initial attraction. Daniel Carter was smart, thoughtful, and far more complex than his confident exterior suggested. No, he said during a lull in conversation, his expression suddenly more serious. I've been on a lot of first dates. Is that what this is? Kristin interrupted, eyebrow raised. A date? I thought it was just post-game analysis. Daniel's smile was slow and deliberate. If you need to call it that, to protect your professional boundaries, by all means. But I think we both know what this is. Kristin had started this night, thinking she was just here for football and harmless flirting. A simple evening out. A way to test the waters of her new social life. Perhaps build a better relationship with an important client. Nothing serious, nothing complicated, just a few hours of entertainment before returning to the bizarre reality that was her new existence. But now, she wasn't so sure. Because sitting across from Daniel Carter, watching the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, feeling the subtle shift in energy when their hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same appetizer, experiencing the unexpected depth behind his carefully maintained facade, she was beginning to suspect this might be something more consequential than she'd anticipated. It's getting late, Daniel observed, though he made no move to leave. The responsible thing would be to call it a night. Probably, Kristin agreed. Equally stationary, early meetings and all that. On a Sunday, Daniel challenged with a knowing smirk. You never know, Kristin replied airily. The design world is unpredictable. Indeed it is, he murmured, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her stomach flip, full of unexpected discoveries and pleasant surprises. The double meaning wasn't lost on her, nor was the way his gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes, a question in them that wasn't being voiced, but was unmistakably present. Another drink, he offered, though they both knew they'd already had plenty. Kristin hesitated, standing at a crossroads. The sensible choice would be to end the evening now, to maintain some professional distance, to process everything that had happened before diving deeper into whatever this was becoming. But Kristin Thompson, it seemed, wasn't always sensible. One more couldn't hurt, she heard herself say, a small smile playing at her lips. For the sake of thorough analysis, of course. Of course, Daniel agreed, his answering smile suggesting he knew exactly what they were both doing. Nothing but the most comprehensive examination of all variables. As he signaled for another round, Kristin had the distinct feeling she was stepping into something she might not be prepared for. Something that could complicate her already complicated life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. And the most surprising part, she wasn't sure she cared.